10 tips to stop brown tips on your spider plant. Hey there, fellow green soul. Welcome back to Earthly Delights, the place where plant lovers like you and me gather to grow, learn, and breathe life into every corner of our homes. Whether you're a seasoned indoor gardener with a jungle of potted companions or just starting out with your very first leafy friend on the windowsill, you're in exactly the right place. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed those dry, crispy brown tips creeping up on the leaves of your spider plant and wondered, what did I do wrong? You're not alone. In fact, this tiny issue is one of the biggest mysteries for indoor plant lovers everywhere. But today, we're going to solve it together, not just with tips, but with the kind of insight that makes you feel deeply connected to your plant's well-being. This video is for you, the quiet nurturer who checks their soil with care, who talks to their plants in the early morning light, who sees houseplants not as decor but as living, breathing beings that bring peace, purpose, and presence into your life. So stay with me till the end, because I've got 10 powerful tips, plus one soulful bonus, that will not only stop those brown tips for good, but help your spider plant thrive in a way that surprises even you. If you're ready to turn your brown tip frustrations into deep green joy, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family here at Earthly Delights. Your journey into the heart of plant care starts now. Tip 1. Protect from direct sunlight. Let's begin with a truth that surprises many plant parents. Your spider plant may be getting too much love from the sun. You see, spider plants might look like they enjoy basking in the light, but in reality, they're more like forest dwellers who crave gentle shadows. In their natural habitat, deep within the forested undergrowth of Africa, spider plants grow beneath the protective canopy of taller trees. Dappled sunlight filters through the leaves above. Never too harsh, never too direct. It's a quiet light, a soft light, and that's what your spider plant longs for, not the fierce, all-day blaze from your south-facing window. If you've placed your plant somewhere that gets direct sunlight, even just for a few hours a day, it could be the silent cause of those crispy brown tips. You may not notice the damage at first, but over time, the ends of the leaves begin to curl, turn brown, and dry out like parchment. The plant isn't being dramatic, it's trying to tell you, this is too much for me. I still remember the first spider plant I brought home. I proudly placed it right in front of a big bright window, thinking more light would mean faster growth. But within weeks, those tips began browning, and I felt like I had failed. I didn't realize then that spider plants thrive in gentle morning light or indirect rays filtered through a curtain. That simple change, pulling the plant a few feet back from the window or shielding it with a sheer drape, made all the difference. So take a moment today to observe where the sunlight hits. Watch how the light moves through your space. If it feels too intense on your skin, it's likely too intense for your plant's leaves. Trust that your spider plant isn't asking for darkness, just a little refuge from the midday blaze. And once you find that sweet spot, that perfect pocket of indirect glow, you'll start to see your spider plant come back to life. One vibrant leaf at a time. Tip 2. Adjust indoor light with care. Now that we've moved your spider plant out of harm's way, away from those scorching sunbeams, it's time to talk about something more subtle, but just as important, the quality of light your plant is getting indoors. Because here's the thing, light isn't just about brightness. It's about balance, direction, and duration. And in our homes, those variables can shift without us even realizing it. You might think a room is bright enough just because it looks sunny in the afternoon. But for your spider plant, the difference between thriving and simply surviving could be as small as the angle of a lampshade or the placement of a bookshelf. Many plant lovers, especially those of us living in apartments or homes with limited windows, struggle with this. I've been there too, walking from room to room with my plant in my hands, whispering, "Where would you be happiest?" One of the most game-changing discoveries I made was using a full-spectrum grow light. Not just any light bulb, but one that mimics the sun's natural wavelengths in a much softer, plant-friendly way. When placed above or near your spider plant, it doesn't burn or bleach the leaves, it gently nourishes them. Especially in the darker months when daylight fades too quickly. Think of it as giving your plant its own personal sunrise, every single day. And don't worry, you don't have to turn your living room into a science lab. These grow lights can be sleek, subtle, even stylish. Just a few hours a day under the right light source can help your spider plant regain that deep green vibrancy and sharp white variegation that makes it so striking. So if you've been struggling with slow growth, pale leaves, or stubborn brown tips, and your plant isn't in direct sun anymore, this could be your missing piece. Remember, in nature, spider plants adapted to a rhythm of steady, filtered light. Bringing that rhythm into your home can breathe life back into your plant in ways you might not expect. When the light feels right, not just for you, but for your leafy friend, everything begins to grow again. Tip 3. Avoid overwatering. Now that we've created the perfect lighting environment, it's time to look beneath the surface, literally, and explore one of the most common causes of brown tips: overwatering. If you've ever lovingly given your spider plant a drink, only to watch those leaf tips turn brown anyway, you're not alone. Many plant parents, especially the nurturing ones, water with the best intentions. But here's the hard truth. Too much water can be just as harmful as too little. Maybe even more. You see, spider plants don't like their roots to sit in soggy soil. When the soil stays too wet for too long, something silent but dangerous begins to happen. The roots start to drown. They can't breathe, and as the cells inside the leaves soak up more water than they can handle, they begin to burst, creating that telltale brown at the tips. It's easy to miss at first. You might just notice a few brown edges and think, maybe it's just dry air. But as time passes, the leaves grow limp, and the damage spreads, and that's your plant's quiet cry for help. I remember the first time I realized my spider plant was suffering from too much love in the form of water. I had a regular watering day, every Sunday. Like clockwork, it felt responsible, routine. But when I finally took the plant out of its pot, the soil was wet and heavy, and the roots were dark and mushy. That moment changed the way I approached every plant in my home. The solution? A pause. A moment to listen before you act. Instead of watering on a schedule, try checking the soil first. Press your finger down a couple of inches. Does it still feel damp? Then wait. Let the top half dry out before watering again. Better yet, invest in a moisture meter, a simple tool that can prevent a world of heartache. And remember, even a healthy routine can become harmful if it ignores your plant's voice. Spider plants don't need constant watering, they need mindful watering. Water that arrives when it's wanted, not when it's expected. Once you find that rhythm, your plant will reward you with strong, glossy leaves that feel like they're reaching toward you in gratitude. Tip 4. Prevent underwatering. We've just talked about the dangers of too much water, but now let's swing to the other side of the pendulum. Because believe it or not, giving your spider plant too little water can be just as damaging. And sometimes, even more sneaky. Underwatering often creeps in without you realizing. It's not as obvious as soggy soil or mushy roots. Instead, it disguises itself in slow decline, dry, brittle tips, curling leaves, and a general sense that your plant just isn't as vibrant as it once was. I'll be honest with you, this is the mistake I'm most guilty of. There's a spider plant in my home that hangs in a beautiful macrame holder, just in front of a west-facing window. It's one of the warmest spots in the house. But because it's a little out of sight, not quite in my daily eyeline, I often forget to water it. Days go by, then a week, and by the time I notice, the leaves are slumped like tired arms, the tips dry and brown, and I'm hit with a wave of guilt. It's not that I don't care. I do care, deeply. But life gets busy, and sometimes, our green companions get pushed to the background. So why does this really happen? When spider plants don't get enough water, the cells in their leaves begin to dehydrate. Imagine a balloon slowly losing air. The structure weakens, the edges collapse, and eventually, the cells begin to die off, starting from the tips. This process creates those unmistakable brown ends that feel paper thin to the touch. And here's something else to consider. If your plant is in a warm, bright spot, especially near a window that gets afternoon sun, the soil can dry out faster than you think. What feels like just a few days to you might feel like a drought to your plant. But the good news is this: you can reverse the trend. All it takes is awareness. Try building a rhythm that fits your space and your lifestyle. Don't aim for perfection, aim for presence. Keep a small reminder near your most forgotten plants. Use a watering day not as a task, but as a ritual, a quiet moment to reconnect with the life you're tending to. Because when you start to notice your plant's subtle signals, the slight droop, the thirsty soil, the quiet ask, you'll find that giving water becomes less of a chore and more of a conversation. And your spider plant? It will thank you with every new leaf it unfurls. Tip 5. Refresh old, exhausted soil. Now let's go deeper, not just into care, but into the very foundation your spider plant depends on, the soil. It's easy to think that once a plant is potted and growing, it's set for life. But soil, just like everything else that supports life, changes over time. It gets compacted, it loses nutrients, it stops breathing, and when that happens, your plant starts showing signs: brown tips, dull leaves, slowed growth, all little signals that the foundation beneath it is quietly fading. Think of soil as more than just dirt. It's the home, the pantry, and the bloodstream of your plant. And when that home becomes cramped, when roots circle endlessly in search of space, or when the nutrients have long been drained, the plant starts to struggle, no matter how much light or water it receives. I remember checking one of my older spider plants, just out of curiosity. It looked fine at first glance, but when I gently pulled it from the pot, I saw a tight swirl of roots and hardly any soil left. The roots were packed so densely, they had nowhere to stretch, no fresh air, no room to absorb what little nutrients remained. It was like a plant trying to grow in memory foam. That day, I repotted it into fresh, airy soil, rich in organic matter and full of life. Within a couple of weeks, the transformation was visible: new shoots, brighter colors, no more crispy tips. It was as if the plant had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. So here's your sign. If you haven't checked your spider plant's soil in over a year, or even 2, it might be time. Gently remove the plant, examine the roots, and if the soil feels compacted, dry, or lifeless, give it a refresh. Look for a well-draining potting mix, ideally one designed for houseplants. You can even mix in a bit of perlite or coconut coir to keep it light and breathable. And don't forget to upsize the pot if needed. A plant that's outgrown its space will keep reaching, but never quite thriving. Refreshing the soil is more than a maintenance task. It's a renewal, a reset, a quiet reminder that even the most grounded things in life need a little change now and then. Tip 6. Use the right water. We've talked about where your spider plant lives, how much light it craves, and even the soil it stands on, but now it's time to talk about something even more essential, something so ordinary we often overlook it: water. You might think, water is water, right? But for your spider plant, not all water is created equal. You see, most of us use tap water without a second thought. It's convenient, always available, and perfectly safe for us to drink. But for plants, especially sensitive ones like the spider plant, what's in that water can quietly cause problems. Over time, minerals like fluoride, chlorine, and salts can build up in the soil. And while they may be invisible to us, your plant feels every drop. The signs often show up in the tips first, those little brown edges, dry and lifeless, are sometimes your spider plant's way of saying, "There's something in this water that I can't handle." I still remember the first time I made the switch. After months of wondering why my spider plant's tips kept browning, even though I was careful with light, watering, and soil, I learned about tap water sensitivity. I started collecting rainwater in a simple container outside my kitchen window. It felt small, almost too simple, but within weeks, the difference was real. The browning slowed, the leaves perked up, and somehow, the whole plant just felt happier. If rainwater isn't an option for you, don't worry, there are other gentle alternatives. Distilled water is a great choice because it's pure and free from the additives that cause trouble. Filtered water can also be a solid option, especially if you're using a pitcher with a carbon filter that reduces chlorine and other chemicals. Just be careful with softened water, especially the kind treated with sodium. That might be easier on your pipes, but it can be harsh on your plants. Even flushing your plant's soil with distilled or filtered water once a month can help cleanse it of built-up salts and chemicals. Think of it like a gentle detox, a fresh start for the roots. So next time you fill up your watering can, take a moment Ask yourself not just how much water your plant needs, but what kind of water you're offering. A small shift here can make a big difference. When your spider plant drinks what it truly needs, it shows you in color, in growth, and in peace. Tip 7. Watch your humidity levels. Now let's turn our attention to something a little more invisible, but just as important as light or water. I'm talking about the air itself, specifically the humidity in the air that surrounds your plant every single day. Spider plants, in their native environment, are used to soft, gentle air, not the kind that blasts from a heater vent or dries out a room like desert wind. They don't demand rainforest conditions, but they do appreciate consistency and a bit of moisture in the atmosphere. And when that balance is off, brown tips often appear, quietly, gradually, as the plant's leaves lose moisture faster than they can absorb it from the roots. What's tricky is that dry air can sneak up on you, especially in colder months when we turn on radiators or heating systems. The room feels cozy to us, but to your plant, it can feel like being stuck in a sauna without water. I remember one winter when I couldn't understand why my spider plant was struggling. I checked the soil, fine. Lighting, perfect. Watering, on point. But still, the tips were drying out. Week after week. It wasn't until I placed a tiny humidity meter on the shelf nearby that I discovered the air in that room was drier than I'd ever imagined, barely hitting 30%. For a spider plant, that's like living in a dehydrator. Once I moved the plant away from the heat source and added a small bowl of water nearby to slowly release moisture into the air, the change was almost immediate. The new leaves came in stronger. The brown tips slowed, and the plant just felt more at ease, like it could finally breathe. You don't need to mist constantly or run a humidifier around the clock. Often, it's the little adjustments that matter most. Moving your plant away from direct air currents, grouping it with other plants to create a microclimate, or simply keeping it out of the driest rooms in the house, all of these can help. And if you're not sure what your home's humidity levels are, a small digital hygrometer can be your new best friend. It quietly tells you what your plants can't say out loud. Because sometimes, the difference between a stressed plant and a thriving one is in the air it breathes. Tip 8. Don't panic over imperfection. Let's pause here for a moment and take a deep breath. Because even when you've done everything right, the perfect light, the balanced water, the fresh soil, and just the right touch of humidity, sometimes those brown tips still show up. And when they do, it's easy to feel frustrated, even discouraged. You might find yourself staring at that one browned leaf, wondering what you missed or what more you could have done. But here's a truth that every plant parent needs to hear. Brown tips are not a sign of failure, they're a sign of life. Your spider plant is a living being, constantly responding to its environment. It grows, it adapts, it ages, and just like us, it carries a few imperfections along the way. A brown tip here, a yellowing leaf there. These are natural parts of a plant's journey. They don't mean your plant is suffering. Often, they mean it's simply adjusting, evolving, surviving. I've had spider plants that have lasted for years, long, graceful leaves spilling over the edge of their pots like green waterfalls. And yes, some of those leaves have browned at the tips over time. But did that make them any less beautiful? Not even close. In fact, it made them more real, more alive. Sometimes, we expect our houseplants to look like the glossy pictures we see online, flawless, vibrant, magazine-worthy, but real plants, just like real people, have stories, and those stories often come with little marks, signs, and scars that show they've been growing through life's challenges, just like you. So the next time you see a brown tip, take a breath. Don't rush to fix it. Don't let panic replace presence. Your care matters, your effort shows, and your plant knows it. Let go of perfection. Embrace the process. Because the truth is, a plant doesn't need to be flawless to be thriving. And neither do you. Tip 9. Trim brown tips the right way. So, let's say your spider plant has a few leaves with brown tips, and you've already made peace with the idea that this doesn't make you a bad plant parent. You've embraced imperfection. You've done your best, but you're still wondering, can I trim them? Should I? The answer is yes, and when done the right way, it's not only safe, but it can be a gentle act of love. Trimming your plant's brown tips isn't just about appearances. It's about energy. You see, when a plant has damaged tissue, it still sends nutrients and moisture to those areas, even if they're beyond repair. By trimming the dead parts, you help your plant redirect its energy to what's healthy and growing. It's kind of like pruning away doubt, or letting go of something that no longer serves you. But here's where it matters. How you trim makes all the difference. You don't want to grab scissors and just snip straight across. That harsh edge? It can shock the leaf and leave an unnatural look. Instead, follow the natural curve of the leaf. Let your scissors move with the shape, not against it, like an artist following the brushstroke of a painting already in progress. Use a clean, sharp pair of scissors and take your time. You're not rushing through a chore. You're tending to something alive, something you've nurtured. As you cut, think of it as giving your plant a little relief, like smoothing a wrinkle from a favorite shirt or giving yourself a fresh haircut after a long week. And don't worry, trimming won't harm your spider plant. In fact, you'll likely notice it looking fresher, more confident, even a little lighter, like it just shed a little baggage. What you'll see afterward isn't just tidier foliage, it's resilience. Proof that a plant can lose a part of itself and still remain whole. Still grow stronger. So if you've been staring at those brown tips wondering what to do, this is your sign. Go ahead, trim with care, and when you're done, take a step back and admire the quiet beauty of a plant that's not perfect, but is absolutely thriving. Tip 10. Build a care routine you can stick to. So now that you've created the right environment, adjusted the light, balanced the watering, and even learned how to trim with confidence, there's one more piece that brings it all together: consistency. And no, this isn't about being perfect. It's about building a rhythm that feels natural for you and sustainable for your lifestyle. Because the truth is, plant care is less about strict rules and more about connection. A routine, when done right, becomes a relationship, something that flows with time, not against it. I used to believe that in order to be a good plant parent, I had to water every Sunday, mist every Wednesday, repot every spring like clockwork. But over time, I realized that my plants didn't need a rigid schedule. What they really needed was presence, someone who noticed, who listened, who took a moment to check in. That's the kind of care that lasts. Instead of creating a routine based on a calendar, try building one based on observation. Each morning, as you pass by your spider plant, take 2 seconds to glance at its leaves. Are they perky or drooping? Is the soil dry or still moist? Is there a new shoot trying to unfurl? These small check-ins, barely a breath in your day, are what make the biggest difference. If you're someone who loves structure, feel free to use a journal or app to track watering days or leaf growth. If you're more intuitive, let your plant guide you. Either way, what matters most is consistency, not perfection, not performance. Because over time, your plant starts to recognize your rhythm. It begins to trust the flow you've created. And you begin to trust yourself, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who knows how to nurture life. With patience and presence, this kind of care routine doesn't just keep your spider plant healthy. It keeps you grounded. It becomes a practice, a peaceful pause in the middle of your week. A reminder that something green and quiet is growing alongside you. Bonus tip: emotional connection makes better plant parents. And now, as we come to the end of our journey together, I want to share something that goes beyond tips, tricks, or care routines, something that lives in the quiet space between you and your plant, the emotional connection. Because behind every spider plant on a windowsill, behind every trimmed leaf and checked soil, is someone who cares. And that care? It's powerful. It's what transforms a houseplant into a companion, a task into a ritual, a moment into meaning. You see, plants respond not only to what you do, but also to how you show up. They grow best when they feel seen, when they're not just watered, but noticed, when their leaves aren't just trimmed, but gently touched, when they're spoken to, even softly, as if they're part of the rhythm of your home. I've always believed that the more present you are with your plant, the more present you become with yourself. In tending to your spider plant, in checking its leaves, adjusting its light, learning its signs, you're also practicing patience, compassion, presence. You're building a kind of awareness that doesn't just stay in the garden, it moves into your relationships, your work, your own self-care. It's easy to underestimate this. After all, it's just a plant, Right? But maybe that's the point. In a noisy, fast-moving world, your spider plant offers you something rare, a chance to slow down. To reconnect with the simple act of caring. So the next time you sit beside it, or run your fingers along its arching green leaves, know this. You're not just helping your plant thrive, you're nurturing something within yourself too. And that, more than anything, is what makes you a beautiful plant parent. If this journey resonated with you, I invite you to join our growing community here at Earthly Delights. Like this video, leave a comment about your plant journey, and don't forget to subscribe, because the more we grow together, the greener life becomes. So here we are, you and your spider plant, standing at the end of a quiet transformation. What began as a simple concern, those dry, browning tips that made you feel like something was going wrong, has become something so much deeper. Because now, you don't just know what to do, you understand why it matters. You've learned how to create a space where your plant can feel safe, shielded from harsh light, nourished with the right water, rooted in healthy soil, and surrounded by just the right amount of moisture in the air. You've seen that care isn't about perfection, but attention. That trimming a leaf can be just as healing as watering a root. And most importantly, you've remembered what makes this all so meaningful: the love, the presence, the quiet connection between you and something green and alive. Because when we tend to plants, we're not just helping them grow, we're growing too, in patience, in gentleness, in the small, sacred art of paying attention. So I invite you now to keep going, keep watching, keep nurturing. Let this be the beginning of a deeper relationship, not only with your spider plant, but with all the life that surrounds you. If this video helped you, even in some small, comforting way, give it a thumbs up. Share your story in the comments below. Tell us where your plant lives, what it's taught you, or even what brown tip moment led you here. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our family here at Earthly Delights, where growth is always green and care is always shared. Your plant is ready for the next chapter. And so are you. I'm so glad we grew through this together. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, your heart in the moment, and your spirit gently rooted in love.